Welcome to Chapter 39. Chapter 39 is going to be about plant defenses. This is actually my favorite plant video because I just think it's so cool the things that plants can do. So ways that plants can be attacked there's tons of them, right? So this is a picture of tobacco mosaic virus that's attacking a tobacco plant. So they can be attacked by viruses and bacteria. They can be attacked by wind and erosion, and they can be attacked by other living organisms, right? And the problem with plants is that they're rooted in the ground, and there's really nowhere for them to go. So they need to have defenses built into themselves to kind of help them to survive these different situations. So some ideas of ways that they can protect themselves. First of all, their first line of defense is going to be their dermal tissue. So here you've got a picture of bark, and so that's going to be a way of keeping things from getting into the plant. Then like their waxy cuticle could be another example. And then here we've got a picture of thorns, right? And so thorns are going to be another deterrent to keep predators away. So these are all ideas that plants can, use to kind of protect themselves from their environment around them because, like I said, they're stationary. They're not going to be able to run away or anything like that. So now what we're going to get into, if you look into the notes here, is going to be chemical ways that they can protect themselves. And so there's a lot of different ways that they can do this. A lot of plants actually have cyanide within them to help protect them from animals eating them and that type of thing. But what we're going to start to get into here are the different types of toxins that we can kind of divide into that are besides those cyanids. So the first group is going to be called the alkaloids. And so as you see here, we've got coffee. And so coffee obviously has an ingredient in it called caffeine, right? So these are coffee beans. And caffeine is something that we've manipulated to make our lives better in the morning. But if you think about it, if you ever think about the first time you had a lot of caffeine, or if you don't tolerate caffeine well, like me, I cannot take caffeine at all. And so when I do, I get like an upset stomach and I get really nervous and jittery, right? And you can imagine for an animal that doesn't know any better, that could be really, really scary, and they probably won't go back to that plant. The next one, tobacco. So tobacco has an ingredient in it called nicotine, right? And so if you've ever smoked and you remember your first cigarette, it made you dizzy, you kind of felt woozy. Some people even throw up from that. And that's going to be because the nicotine is just working overtime on them. And so that's going to be nicotine, and actually you can overdose on nicotine, which is crazy. The next one, cocaine. Cocaine is going to obviously have stimulants in it that are going to cause overstimulation, right? So if you think about anybody who's had a cocaine overdose, basically their heart goes insane and can even stop, right? And then finally, the last one in this group is going to be morphine, and that's from the poppy plant, so you can see the poppies right there. And so what happens is morphine can cause oversedation. So all those other ones were kind of overstimulating. This one can cause oversedation, and that can literally make you your heart just slow down so much that it stops. So those are all going to be in a category that are called the alkaloids. You can see right here. The next one is going to be the tannins. And the tannins are going to work in a different way. Let's see. Here we go. These are the tannins right here. And so what this is a picture of is tea. This is how tea leaves actually grow. And what these are going to have in them, and over here, these are actually grapes for like red wine. And so these both are going to have tannins in them. And what tannins do is they bind to proteins in your stomach, and they can actually make you have an upset stomach. Now, not all of them are going to do this, right? You don't get sick when you drink red wine, and you don't get sick when you drink, certain types of tea. But they do have the possibilities in certain plants to do that to someone. Then the last group is going to be oils. And so there are going to be some plants that will secrete oils in order to protect themselves. So here you've got the peppermint plant, and then I've got a picture of the sage plant, citronella, any of those. And what those are going to do is secrete oils that are going to act as insect repellents. And so what that'll do is actually keep the insects off the leaves and keep them from eating the leaves. Because if you think about it, that's what is going to really harm the plant the most, is something getting through that dermal tissue, and then they're going to lose water to the environment. They could be open to diseases. So that's a huge issue. So any of these are going to have some sort of repellent characteristic about them to protect them from insects coming in. Okay, so those are some pretty crazy toxins that we've talked about. And a couple of questions come up. First, why don't the plant toxins kill the plant? So there's two reasons why that might not happen. The first is that they're contained in membrane-bound vesicles. So here, if you remember, plants are going to have those vacuoles, which they use for storage, and they can store the chemicals in there. And if they're sealed off with a membrane, they're not going to get into contact with anything else inside the cell. You've experienced this if you've ever cut into an onion and your eyes started to tear. So what happens with an onion is it'll have one chemical in this vacuole here, and then let's say it has the other chemical in this vacuole here. Separately, they're completely inert, they don't do anything. But once you slice into that, and then you've kind of got these two chemicals to mix because you've opened those vacuoles, that's when it releases that gas that makes you tear up. And an onion is trying to keep you from eating it. Of course, we as humans are like, oh, that's awesome, and we eat it. But anyway, then another reason that they're not going to hurt the plant is a lot of them will only be able to work if they get into contact with enzymes in the digestive tract. So obviously, the plant doesn't even have those. But once it gets into an animal's digestive tract, it gets exposed to those enzymes, then it might start activating. So that's how they're going to protect themselves. Another thing that's cool that plants can do is they can actually have chemicals within them that will protect them from other plants, and that's called allelopathy. So you can see these creosote bushes here, and there's a huge space in between them. And that's because what they'll do is actually secrete chemicals into the soil that will kill off any plants around them within a certain radius. And that is their way of protecting their water, protecting their resources, space, sunlight, and all of that type of thing. Something a little bit closer to home that does that is like all of the onion family. So like chives, garlic, onions, all of them do allelopathy. And that's why if you want to grow them in your garden, you have to make sure that you put them a little bit further away from anything else you want to grow because they will kill it off. I can vouch for that because even though I teach this, I did that last summer. I didn't even think. I just planted some onions, planted some peas next to them, and all the peas died, and all the onions did great. And I was like, oh, allelopathy. And then the last thing we're going to talk about in this first section is going to be one last way that plants can protect themselves, and that's by having bodyguards in them. So we've kind of talked about this already, but the acacia trees and ants is a perfect example of this. So you have these acacia trees. They provide the ants with that nectar. Remember, this is a mutualistic association. And what's going to happen is these plants, when they get bit by an herbivore, they will actually release a pheromone that's recognized by these ants. And the ants will come and attack the herbivore trying to eat the tree. Another cool thing about acacia trees that they can do is they can change their internal chemistry when it's really, really dry, like drought conditions, so that if something eats them, it does get sick. And what's really cool is even if there isn't a drought, and let's say this tree gets harmed by an herbivore eating it, it can send a pheromone to other acacia trees and tell them to change over their chemistry as if it's a drought to make those herbivores in the area get sick. I think that is so cool. So that's one example. Next example, this is a little bit of a gnarly one, is going to be the parasitoid wasp example. And so what happens is there is a plant that lives in the rainforest, and obviously caterpillars and things are going to be interested in biting the leaves of this plant. So what's going to happen is once the plant gets bit by this caterpillar, it's going to send out a pheromone that is going to be recognized by this parasitoid wasp. This wasp is going to come straight to the plant, find the caterpillar, and then it's going to lay its eggs inside the caterpillar. And the larvae are going to eat their way out, keeping the caterpillar alive just enough to feed them and whatnot while they mature. So this is actually a picture of the caterpillar with the larvae growing out of it. So a little bit gnarly, but if you want to see a video about it, there's a good one on YouTube that you can Google. Okay, so on the next part, we're going to get into some hormones and things that plants can create.